All righty. All right. Do you want to reintroduce yourself or you want me to go?
Go ahead and kick it off.
All right. So as Lemi said, Lemi and myself, Grace Lee Sawin, we have been doing this What's on the Test, Understanding CPS Selective Enrollment in Elementary Schools for a little bit now. It is definitely our passion is to help families really, get to know how to get all about these programs because they are certainly a lot of people have heard about them. They don't know exactly, much about them, and certainly, is it a good fit? So my side of things, I'm Chicago School GPS. I help families understand, that whole school search, and also bring it down to the personal level of your family, and all the other things that are not applicable to your family. You don't have to have take up brain space. So I know how overwhelming that can be. But what I've done for the last, many years, 9 years, I guess I've had my company, is just really helping families determine, that best path forward. So we are going to talk today.
I'll go ahead and do a quick introduction
Oh,
to it.
sure.
It seems
Yes.
like this is a good point. My name is Lemi-Ola Erinkitola from the Critical Thinking Child, and I've been working alongside Grace to help Chicago land families sort of figure out the whole selective enrollment process from the angle of how to get your child ready for the test, and more importantly, how to prepare your child to have long-term sustainable academic success. So I'm just gonna throw that out there, and Grace will kick off the first part of the presentation, and then my part will come later. Go ahead, Grace.
All righty. So I think my slides will be working, and I'll just put the chat over to the side. So essentially, we are going to talk about Chicago CPS gifted and classical options from admissions through testing. So the first part will be admissions, and let's get started, and what that whole thing is all about. Admission selection notification, really elementary in Chicago is kindergarten through 8th grade. And these programs, selective enrollment programs, elementary, SEES, that really goes kindergarten through 8th grade. But the entry point certainly is not earlier than kindergarten. So we're going to concentrate on that. CPS, Chicago Public Schools, absolutely is a large school district. It has, fewer students now, like 300 and I don't know, 75,000 students in the school district. And there with that are so many choices for every family, and within each family there are definitely different different ability kids or different strengths. So all of that, one family can have definitely multiple learners and multiple types of schools. But CPS, as we said, elementary is considered K through 8th grade. So that is a long time span. The cutoff, the traditional cutoff for entering kindergarten is 5 by September 1st. So if your child, September 1st, inclusive of September 1st, has a birthday and they are 5, then they are slated automatically through CPS into kindergarten. There is an age exception for students who have families who have students who are born between September 2nd and December 31st. If they wanted to start kindergarten that fall, that they're just past that cutoff. That is called the Illinois Accelerated Placement Policy. We'll talk a little bit about that towards the end, but I will say that anytime you have, or anytime a family has or a school district has a cutoff, what happens is obviously there's going to be kids from one side of the cutoff to the other side of the cutoff. There's always, definitely kids who are 360, 4 days apart from each other, but in the same grade. So yes, this policy is available, but it's definitely not necessarily a great fit for everybody. And there's always going to be, different ranges of ages in any classroom. The the process for CPS, for applying and for testing and everything is free. So we usually tell families who, they don't know your little ones are 3, they're 4. Well, when they're testing, they're 4, and they've never taken a test. You don't know if they are quote unquote, accelerated, gifted, etc. But it's free to test and it's free to apply. So we always tell families, sure, you can definitely think about doing that. When you do apply and go into this whole process, you start 1 year before the program entry. So again, the programs for selective enrollment do not start until kindergarten. So the families are not really doing anything, I say, until your child is 4 by September 1st. That fall is when you would enter into this process. And once your child is accepted, there is no need to reapply and, I get this question, can we be, kicked out of the program if my child's not keeping up? No, there's certainly families, sometimes the kids have a little extra help with the teacher, maybe after school or something like that. I've seen that happen. But there's always going to be in any classroom kids of different abilities, but once you test in, you are in and you don't have to continue to test to stay in. So the first thing is to understand about CPS is CPS with a large school district, you have a lot of elementary schools, right? You have probably, I want to say almost 400 elementary schools, which is a lot. And with those, not every single one, just because it's a CPS elementary school, does not mean that it is each one is exactly the same as the other one, all the 400 elementary schools. They are quite different. And with that, that's probably why it's so confusing for families to understand the CPS system, because not every school has the same math curriculum and not every school has the same, reading and social studies. And there's a lot of autonomy between schools. And therefore, there's actually different types of CPS elementary schools. Certainly, every address in the city has a neighborhood school that is assigned to it, just the way that if you're in the suburbs or another state or whatnot, every address, every home has a guaranteed school. That's your neighborhood school. But also in CPS, there are certainly other types of schools. Today, we're only going to talk about the 2 in bold red, and then a little bit touch on the one in the lighter red, because these are specific programs that maybe are housed in a school or the standalone. Those programs are the only programs in that school. But I like to emphasize that there are, certainly you may have heard of magnet schools or I don't know, charter schools or magnet cluster. These are all different terms for they still, go K through 8 for elementary. They still teach math, English, social math, reading, science, social studies, all those core subjects, but how they go about it is slightly different. And we're going to focus on the classical programs and the regional gifted center programs, with a little touch on the academic centers, which is really far away for those of you with 4-year-olds. So let's just kind of understand that there are a lot of schools out there, and certainly there's different, different focus for each one. All right, so with the selective enrollment and the classical schools, classical regional gifted center schools, these are called citywide schools. So these are schools that are certainly, there's appeal to families who want a little bit of acceleration for their students. And so CPS says, okay, they've created these programs, these classical and regional gifted center programs to, be something that families who want that acceleration can apply to, but they're going to open it to people throughout the city. And then therefore it's called a citywide program. So in CPS, and CPS says, all right, a citywide program should therefore reflect the demographics of the city. And up until, gosh, I can't remember the exact year, but let's say 2011, there was like there was a diversity quota as a racial quota that these citywide programs reflecting the diversity of the city should be, back then it was race, it was 65% minority and 35% Caucasian. And then up until that point, and then around, 2011 or so, the city or the courts actually throughout that was called a racial consent decree, and that was thrown out by the courts, but CPS said they really do like the diversity of these citywide programs that should reflect the whole city. So they like that diversity, and therefore they wanted to have another, something implemented. So they came up with a socioeconomic tier by census tract system, only for programs that are citywide, and those are only the test-based programs, selective enrollment, and magnet programs. So we're not going to talk about magnet programs in this seminar, but those are the only programs that employ this tier system. So there's a lot of I don't know, just misunderstanding about it. And I just really want to clarify that it's only a tier system. You never have to worry about it if you're only looking at neighborhood schools, or, just a school that's not your own neighborhood, but you're trying to apply to it. It's just for citywide programs. So that being said, it's only also for the entry year of a program. And they only usually utilize it in the early rounds of these programs. So the entry year, for the most part, is kindergarten for selective enrollment elementary programs. And I'll show you a list of what those programs are. But so typically kindergarten is the entry point. There are two programs actually that start in first grade, Beaubien and Keller. Otherwise, the city is divided into 4 socioeconomic tiers based on census tracts. So tier 4 is, and these are just, they're based on this criteria I'll talk about, but basically tier 1 is the lowest socioeconomic tier overall, and tier 4 is the highest. These tiers do change yearly, and typically when the applications open. So the applications opened this past Monday, and I believe they said that they have reflected a tier change. So what tier you are one year may not be the same tier you are in another year. So just know that. The reason why they change is ultimately CPS every year wants the same amount of school-age children in each tier. So when you have population fluctuations, it's going to affect and rejigger that. So for selective enrollment, which is what we're talking about, test-based, entry, selective enrollment selection, it's at entry year only. So 30% of the seats in a classroom. Let's say you're looking at National Teachers Academy. It starts in kindergarten. It has one classroom of, let's say 30 students. 30% of those seats are going to students irrespective of tier. They could be tier 4, high socioeconomic tier, all of them. So it's just a high score citywide. And then the remaining 70% of seats are distributed evenly among the high scores from each of those 4 tiers. So if you divide 70% by 4, essentially 17.5% of the seats at National Teachers Academy are to the high scores from each of those 4 tiers. So in the end, you may actually have, with 30% of the seats at National Teachers Academy kindergarten going to possibly tier 4 students, and 17.5% of seats definitely going to tier 4 students. I usually say what happens is that you may have 47.5% of that entering kindergarten classroom may be taken up by tier 4 students, which are the high socioeconomic tier. Anyway, so entrance testing, which Lemi will talk about, is usually done 1 year prior to entry. So really, if the starts in kindergarten, then your child will be tested that fall when they're still 4. The only prerequisite for kindergarten to 4th grade selective enrollment programs is to be able to separate from the caregiver. That's it. They just want to make sure that the child can certainly do this on their own, and they're taken down. We'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of that we actually don't know completely what's going to happen this year because of COVID, but we'll talk about our speculations. But anyway, you can't be in the room with your child, so make sure that they are able to separate from you. And testing for the upper grades, 5th through 8th grade, does require this what's called NWA MAP testing eligibility. So that is something that, again, you guys mostly, I believe, are pretty far away from that. So we won't dwell on that too much. Okay, so this is just a screenshot of the tier criteria, if you will. So these they're little shapes on the I don't know if you can see my mouse, but basically there's little shapes that are called census tracts, and for each one, you can click on one. This one over here was a tier 3. This one that was my arrow was on was a tier 4. So you can see that they are broken up by 6 factors. None of them ask race, but they do have data collected. They're never going to ask a family their personal information, but data. 6 criteria are what's the median family income of the census tract, the educational attainment of the parents, or the single versus dual parent households, owner versus renter occupied homes, if English is the first language, and the performance of the local area school. And all the data is crunched, and then it's determined whether or not this area is a tier 4, high socioeconomic tier, down to a tier 1, lower socioeconomic tier. And then this is from the school locator tool, and you can just type in any address and it'll pop up that year, what tier that address was, and also, what your 9 through 12 and your K through 8 school is. So this is just a very helpful tool called the school locator tool. All right. So going back to, that was sort of a little detour just to explain tiers, just because that is something that does confuse families. But let me get back to the basics of what these programs, these selective enrollment programs are, or what CPS says they are. So there are 2 names of programs. One is called classical schools, and the other one is called regional gifted centers. So a classical school is defined by CPS somewhere in their parlance. You can go through all their volumes of literature, but it does say somewhere there they emphasize high achievement in liberal arts. Liberal arts, the base math, reading, science, social studies, etc. Definitely the foundational educational building blocks. And then regional gifted centers, it says, well, those programs emphasize critical thinking, problem solving, logical reasoning, etc. I do not like these 2 definitions, because to me, actually, it is more that any school should do both of these, right? Any good school should do both. They should obviously teach, high achievement in liberal arts. They should also, for sure, teach, critical reasoning, logical reasoning, critical thinking, all that stuff. So what I really say distinguishes these 2 programs is the test. And Lemi will talk about specifics on that. But essentially, a classical school test is more of an achievement-based test. How is your student in their reading and math? Those are the 2 subject areas. How much have they achieved? What are they doing in that area at the time that they're sitting for the test, right? So if your child is reading a little ahead of her peers, or doing a little math, work and math concepts a little ahead of his peers, then that is something that is, slightly obviously talked about or tested for. So that achievement versus the regional gifted center programs, those are actually more aptitude. Your child does not have to know how to read to do well on this test. It's more kind of like an IQ test. So, picture puzzles, patterns, etc. So that is really what the aptitude is. And we'll give some examples of that. But essentially, classical schools at one point only went up to 6th grade. They now have added all the grades. Before, Skinner North and Skinner West were the only ones that went up to 8th grade. Now Decatur has an addition. They're going up to 8th grade because it was just so strange for a while there. There were middle schools way back when in CPS, then they, were all K through 8, except for a couple of these schools. So now, instead of kids at 6th grade having to go off to a different school, these other, historical classical schools have all grown up to 8th grade now. Regional gifted centers have been K through 8, except for, as I said, those 2 exceptions. Beaubien and Keller just happen to start in 1st grade, but go up to 8th grade. So you test for those when you have a kindergartner somewhere, and then you're testing at that 5-year-old age to get into a 6-year-old 1st grade program. Otherwise, CPS somewhere in their parlance says, okay, classical schools are accelerated about 1 to 1.5 years by the time your child graduates 8th grade. And then regional gifted centers, they say up to 2 years. But again, this is not hard and fast by any means. They are actually very similar programs at the very end. Both of them offer accelerated self-contained instruction for the core classes, meaning that you are, as your child is testing in as, coming in as a kindergartner among their peers. And so their math, reading, science, and social studies classes, those core classes, are together with the cohort that they tested into. But maybe their music class and their art class, gym class can be mixed if there is, some of these programs are housed in schools that have like a neighborhood component to them. So where are these schools and what grades do they serve? So these schools for sure do start, at kindergarten at the earliest. And then they absolutely, I'm going to stop my own video. Sorry. I just realized I could do that. Okay. So they start at kindergarten for Decatur. All the classical schools start at kindergarten. The regional gifted centers, again, with only Beaubien and Keller, but this is showing you it's changed actually. This whole over time, CPS is not written in stone. It is organic. So Sorwana and Bronzeville Classical on this part here, they were added a couple of years ago, and now next year they'll go up to 5th grade. The year after that, they'll add 6th grade all the way through 8th grade in a couple of years. So you'll see that those classical schools will go up. The grades in red, so these ones are housed in standalone programs. The ones that are like Skinner West co-shares, so there's one classroom of the classical program, and then the rest of Skinner West is neighborhood. Likewise, over on the regional gifted center side, Edison is standalone, Leonard and Keller are standalone, but the other programs are housed in schools that have, maybe a neighborhood component. So for almost all of these. So it is just whether or not it is a standalone school, and that's the only thing in that school, or it's a program within a school. Most of these are one class per grade of no more than 30 students. Usually 28 is kind of that magic number that I've heard. So maybe in let's say Bell, that starts in kindergarten, they have 28 students in the kindergarten regional gifted center, and then they have, I don't know, almost like 4 other kindergarten classes that are neighborhood. So you have certainly a large group of kindergartners, but only one classroom will be the regional gifted center. So the ones that are bold, I say, are sort of north of downtown Chicago, and then the ones that are not in bold are south. So you'll see that there are, I don't know, count these, there's like, 18, 20 of these programs. So they're all over the city. Okay, so with that, let me try and advance my slides again. Okay, here we go. So tours. Yes, I used to use this slide and say, go out and see schools. You can't do that now. So that being said, tours are now virtual. There's certainly, a way to kind of get to know a school. It's not the same for sure. But now I say, look at social media, or there are LSC, local school council meetings that are monthly and should be open meetings, and also friends of meetings. So friends ofs or PTA or whatnot are the volunteer parent organizations, and they also tend to have meetings. Or look on the website, you can look up, officers for those and contact them. And so you can try and get parent feedback that way. So it's a little harder to visit a school, I will say. But overall, school tours, they do, even with remote tours, you need to pace yourself. But some schools have more often the tours, and other schools are just like, hey, during application season we have a tour. So we always say yes, this process can be a little bit grueling to kind of try and see all these schools, especially when you're looking at also maybe magnet schools. So you're definitely trying to figure out that whole process. So we say you can, you don't have to necessarily, I don't know, you need to now for the virtual tours get, I guess, a Zoom link or whatever, but it's not something that like, oh, if you're not applying this year, you can't go on a tour. You can go on a tour if you're pregnant. It doesn't matter. So we usually say start the process early. We also say, certainly, obviously, you only apply to the schools that you would consider accepting. So for this process, for the selective enrollment schools, you can only apply up to 6 schools for selective enrollment, and you're going to rank your choices. So maybe you only see 6 or so, or maybe 7, and you go down to 6. So on CPS's Go CPS, they do have an event calendar that you can look at some tours. They do have that posted, and we also try and post those on our website as well. All right. So this whole process of what do, I guess there's, I'm going to take a shot for my child. She seems really bright. I wanted to be able to, free to test, free to apply. Let's try it. So the process to apply is that you do first apply and schedule, your testing. You take your child in for testing, and then obviously notification. So apply 1 year before the program starts. Kindergarten, if your child must be 5 by September 1st, then you will apply when your child is 4 by September 1st. First grade is CPS is pretty hard and fast for 6 years by September 1st, or that age exception also applies to first grade too. So we'll talk a little bit about this at the end, but not a lot of families, as I said, in my 9 years, very few families have ever taken advantage of the early entrance to kindergarten, because honestly, these programs do start at a little accelerated pace. So just to have a young child to begin with, and then they're accelerated, I haven't seen very many people take advantage of that. All right, so the application for CPS did open October 12th. The deadline this year is December 11th. The application itself is very basic. They just need your child's name, birth date, address, contact information, etc. And pretty much you can apply. Let's see, here we go. Go.cps.edu is the place for all your CPS application needs, whether it's selective enrollment or the other programs. But basically, they really want you to apply online. It's going to be much easier for you if you apply online, just to keep it all straight. But the first thing is to activate an account with requesting a student ID. All that is on go.cps.edu. So for sure, take a look at that. And so there are the 2 parts, if you will. The first thing is, if you are going to have to choose schools. People say, well, how do I know what schools to choose? Because they haven't, given me a score. My child hasn't tested yet. You're just going to have to take that leap of faith or whatever. Like essentially you're picking schools based on your child hopefully has never taken a test yet as a 4-year-old. And so you don't know. And that's fine. But like, what schools would you, let's say your child has pegged the top of the scales, and what school would that, would they want to be a part of? So essentially CPS is asking families to first determine 6 schools, rank them, hit submit, and then when the computer sees that you have chosen test-based programs, then you will be given an opportunity to choose a test date. I have heard, however, right now, just real-time kind of thing, is CPS has not released any test dates yet. So even if you were really on it and December 12th or December 13th, a couple days ago, whatever, you went ahead and you tried to apply, and then hit schedule, I have heard that people did not necessarily were not able to schedule quite yet. Okay, so That's just something that you will be able to schedule. I just don't know. Somebody also told me that the testing may not begin until December. It was supposed to be in November. In prior years, it has been, but they're still figuring it out. Clearly, yeah. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Otherwise, remember you need to click submit on your application, and then certainly you're going to have to schedule your test date. This whole portal is open until December 11th, just so you know, so you don't have to like get it all buttoned up until December 11th, and then certainly you have to have all that. So right now, if you went ahead and you put in 6 schools and you're not quite sure, you can change, you can make changes and everything, but December 11th it gets knocked down. So, all right. I'm getting a little bit sidetracked by these people's questions. So I'm not going to look at that right now. I'm going to go through this first and then we'll answer questions in a little bit. Okay. So that being said, testing, and again, I'm going to go through this quickly because Lemi is going to go through it in a little bit more detail, but the prerequisite is definitely able to separate from the caregiver. We believe this is definitely still going to be in person somewhere. We don't know where. It used to be down at IIT, the university, and yes, your child would walk away from you and go down a hallway, and it was very nerve-wracking because you've told their 4 little years of their lives to certainly never go off with a stranger, and now you're like, go. So it's a little different. We don't know what it's going to be like this year. It may not be at IIT. CPS clearly has a lot of empty elementary schools right now, so it may be a little bit more localized. We don't know. But that is something we still believe you're going to have to separate from the caregiver. There are separate tests for classical and regional gifted center schools. So remember we said the classical schools are achievement-based tests, questions, and regional gifted center are aptitude-based. There are separate tests, but the kindergarten tests are both given to the students in one sitting. So it's called a one-on-one, or, again, this is all pre-COVID. We cannot guarantee any of this is going to be exactly the same this fall. But so far in the past, kindergarten tests were oral, one-on-one with a proctor, and just the child and the proctor in a room. The proctor would give the test orally. There would be a piece of paper in front of the child and they would be pointing to the answers, and both types of questions were given to each student. So that was you could just be only interested in classical schools, but you're given questions for regional gifted center as well as a kindergartner. So in this oral one-on-one format, maybe there's like maybe your kid's really fast and it only takes 5 minutes for each type of test. Or maybe, your kid's taking their time and warming up, and maybe it's over 20 minutes for each type of test or whatnot, but they're done consecutively, the questions and whatnot. So it's just automatically given as a kindergarten. Usually they have said for kindergarten grades only, if parents for their student picked an early test day, prior in pre-COVID times, families would know their students' test results prior to this December 11th this year, this deadline. Last year they did that. They said, oh, if you tested by, I don't know, November 17th or something last year, you would get your results before that December deadline. This year, I've heard there's no November test dates, so I don't know how they're going to do that. If they're going to do that, who knows? They are still definitely figuring it all out. So the thing about testing early, though, is that some families say, "Oh, I definitely want to wait a long time for my child to gain more knowledge in their head." But CPS, how they grade or how they tests are scored, is the age of your child to the day that they sat down to take this test, especially for 4-year-olds. So the age of your child. So if your child waited 2 more months, they would also be older by 2 more months and graded against students who are 2 more months older too. So there is no, there's no advantage necessarily to waiting. So we just always emphasize that. All right, if you're testing for first grade and above, the tests are given in the past. Again, we don't know during COVID, but in the past they were given in small groups, maybe 20 kids in a room together. So it was paper and pencil. Each child would have their own packet in front of them. Proctors would walk around the room, make sure each child was on the right question, et cetera. So it's a longer process. So first grade above, because of that, they would require students to choose different days. If you were looking at both regional gifted center and classical programs, you would have to have different days for your child. So that's just something to know. Again, pre-COVID, this is what happened. I suspect it's going to be the same for post-COVID, just because it's a longer process for the paper and pencil sit down kind of thing. Schedule the test per your convenience, meaning you do have a choice of test dates whenever they do come on board. You have a choice of test dates. So it's just a matter of, like, obviously looking and when they do have them online, figuring out. What we also have heard is that actually the earlier that you look for test dates, they don't release all the dates through, usually they test all the way until February. They don't release all the dates at once. They actually release them in batches. So those who are looking earlier will only see earlier dates, and then those who are looking obviously later, the earlier dates are gone. So just so you know, I think they release them in batches. So you will not necessarily see, like, if you want to apply now and you don't want to test your child until February, you may have to sit on waiting to schedule until later on. Okay. Print out the confirmation page, bring it to the test. I mean, all this is certainly hopefully the same. Schedule early in case you have to reschedule. So this is the thing, is that and especially pre-COVID, yeah, there was flu or sniffles or whatever in the wintertime. And so they had the finite number of days that they were going to lay out, like it usually went until February. But if your child if you chose the last test day for your child and then your child was sick, they do not add extra days for makeup. So we usually say don't choose the last several days. Definitely choose before that, because they do allow you to make up if you have to miss one day. Again, I don't know what it's like for COVID, but that is kind of what we usually say, is don't ever just schedule that last day as your first time. So there you go. Scores are computed based on age at the time of the test, as I said before. So there's really no point or reason to wait per se, just so you know. All right, so for academic centers, and again, I don't believe there's many people on here. So I'm just going to just give you a breeze through. Academic centers are 7th and 8th grade programs that are housed in high schools that are accelerated by about 2 years. So a 7th grader is actually learning 9th grade material. And so to test into these programs, there is a prerequisite for MAP test, which is by the time 3rd grade rolls around, students are getting regular assessments. And so they should, at least right now, CPS is using MAP. They may change, they've changed over the years. But so there's a prerequisite. If your child is scoring above that, then they can pursue these opportunities. They also, this academic center thing that starts in 7th grade looks at 5th grade final grades, and there's also the entrance exam, and they have a 900-point score total, etc. So again, it's just a slightly more comprehensive process. It's not just the test. So by the time your child is in middle school looking for an accelerated program, just know that it is certainly a little bit more involved with the process, including their GPA. Tests are done in small groups. They sometimes give this extra section to do future sections to include or not include. So it's a long process. They're there for quite a while, but schedule a test again for the convenience of your family. Print out test confirmation and, oops, sorry, what did it say? Oh, CPS tends to schedule later tests in the testing window. So meaning the academic centers, they're usually not given early. CPS concentrates earlier, November, December, etc. On the younger set, the K through 4th grade kids, and then the academic centers, I usually hear that they don't give those tests until at least Christmas break is their first time or something like that. Okay, so the whole process of applying, right? Go to go.cps.edu, pick your schools, schedule test dates, etc. That all happens. Everything has to happen by December 11th, the scheduling. Again, you can sit for the test after December 11th, but everything has to at least be applied for by that. Then, maybe your child sits for the test in February or whatever. When do you hear anything? CPS usually provides test results and how your child did. So you don't even find out how they did when you're applying, actually. So they find out, you find out this in April, late April, and whether or not you get an offer. So usually in the past, CPS has released this April, I don't know, literally the end of April. There's a single numerical score for the gifted test. Lowest number is 115 in the past. 160 has been the max for kindergarten. And then percentiles for the classical test, they used to go up to a 10th percentile for kindergarten, and then they dropped the 10th percentile for first grade on up. Again, it may have changed slightly, but that's kind of, but if your child scores below 80th percentile, they're usually not selected for classical schools. Anyway, so the letter or your results or portal will indicate if your child was accepted to school, and then if so, what are the next steps? But placement or offers are based on the child's score. From the high scoring kid in the city of Chicago who sat for these tests, the high scoring kid, let's say a kid got 160 for the kindergarten test. So the computer goes by that high score and then pulls that kid's application to see what was chosen as number one. So the whole placement is really, it first goes by how your child scored. The high scores goes first all the way down until the seats are, if the seats are filled in these particular schools that were on your application. So it's a single offer system. Of those 6 schools that you put down, you are only given the highest one that your child academically, whatever from this test qualified for. So if your child was the highest scoring kid in the city of Chicago and whatever they put down as number one, they're going to get. So the computer doesn't even look at the other choices. That's fine. That child's done. If it comes down and your child's score is a little bit, whatever in the middle there, the computer will say, okay, your child scored, I don't know, 135. And so with that score, is your child's first choice? Are they full yet? Yes. Okay. Looks to see your child's second choice. Are they full yet? Third choice, not full yet. Great. It gives an offer and the process stops. Okay. But if you're denied all 6 choices or however many you put down, then you're not out of the running at all. Your child's not out of the running. It just goes to what's called another round, a subsequent round. So there is a deadline to accept or reject your acceptance, and all these subsequent rounds continue throughout the spring. So let's say, yes, families get offers, but maybe it was like their 4th choice and they realized it was too far away. It turned out to be like a pretty decent choice for you guys. So maybe that family turned it down. And then if so, then, the computer will go through and crunch through and say, oh, there's an empty seat at this school. Let's go and see who has that and what their score was. And if they're, if that's how it matches up to get subsequent rounds. So it's really sort of a wait list, but based on test scores. And then the wait list itself, once the initial period or first round, last year they had you had about 2-week turnaround for the first offer in April. You had about 2 weeks to try and do tours and etc. But then after that, subsequent rounds, they usually said 48 business hours was how long families had to determine. And like a lot of times families have not seen the school. So there's a lot of scrambling, and that's when I get a lot of calls. I'm like, can you tell me about the school? All right. So CPS dates for this application season. Right now, October 12th, the CPS application opened. You activate the account, you research and apply. You can favorite schools and whatnot. Online application closes at 11:59 on December 11th. Okay, so you can put your 6 schools, but you're not quite sure how to rank them yet. You can actually, after December 11th, you're locked into those 6 choices, or if you only did 5, whatever, 4, but you can change your rankings February 1st, all the way through February 1st. I mean, so you have to pick your schools, but you can play around with the rankings a little bit afterward. And then I suspect they haven't announced it yet, but I suspect April 2021 is the first round notifications. And then usually soon after in May, like 2 weeks later, they're going to have that first round due, and then they'll start this the waitlist round. And then for the tier system, they usually don't go more than 3 to 4 rounds. After that, it's just test scores. It doesn't matter what tier you're in. Okay, so essentially what we say to families is that, listen, selective enrollment is not the right path necessarily for every child. There are so many different options for education beyond these selective enrollment schools. Typically every year, over 4,000 applicants for this small number of spots. So remember I showed you the list of schools. Most of them only have one class of less than 30 students per grade. So there's not a lot of spaces out there. So what happens to a child who, let's say there's 30 spaces, what happens to a child who's, 30, whatever, 31st or 32nd high scoring kid for that class? They didn't get an offer. Well, where do they go? They go to neighborhood schools, they go to magnet schools, they go to private schools, they go all over the place. Any good school should meet your child at where, that at their level and challenge them. And that's the hallmark of a good school. So there are amazing kids at, neighborhood programs. There's amazing kids at magnet programs. And just so you know, selective enrollment does not guarantee for your whole family. It's per child basis. So there's no sibling preference for your younger siblings, et cetera, or even a twin. One twin tests in, one doesn't. So we always say that, just there are families who turn down an offer for selective enrollment because they don't want their kids to be split up. So if you're, absolutely, you should have other options. Research all of those, tour those schools. You can do the magnet open enrollment process. There's also CGP and SAP. CGP stands for Comprehensive Gifted Programs, and SAP stands for Specific Aptitude Programs. And these are within a school, an elementary school, that maybe isn't selective enrollment, but within a school, there is a way, certainly through assessments and everything like that, a particular school, like a neighborhood school or a magnet school, will group together the different abilities and differentiate that way. And so they may have what's called comprehensive gifted in that school. Once you're in it, then you're internally tested. But you can apply to these other programs. It's not going to impact the selective enrollment process. That lottery-based application is called the choice application. So you have a whole another 20 schools you can choose for that. There are high-performing kids and programs throughout CPS and elsewhere. Yes, absolutely. There's many things. Just because you get an offer does not mean that this is the best school fit. And yes, there is no sibling preference, which is a big reason why a lot of families do turn down their offers, because they kind of realize that logistics. So school, sports, all this, every school has a different feel to it. So of course, there's also that aspect of why you choose a school. Illinois accelerated placement policy. I know at least one person mentioned this, so I will go through this very briefly. But essentially, it's an early entrance to kindergarten, and you have to demonstrate readiness, and you have to have been to a preschool program. It's not for homeschool kids, I guess. I don't know. In the time of COVID, I don't know how they're really going to do this, but there's also specific subject acceleration as part of this Illinois Placement Act, and then whole grade acceleration. There's guidelines for that. But CPS offers fall and winter or spring and summer evaluations for these early entrance kindergarten and first grade. The tests that are done are looking for there's a developmental survey and an academic and cognitive evaluation. There's like two separate pieces. They do charge you for that test, $50 if you're a city resident, $250 if you're not. It's a 6-step process. It's all at CPS's website, go.cps.edu. So if you do it in the fall and winter, you are actually evaluating your child earlier, but then you can see, you can go into the process for this to hit the December 11th deadline. So Otherwise, yes, I will turn it over to Lemmy. Let me get ready because I'm going to turn it over to you. And I don't even know how to. Oh, I'm going to turn back on my video. But what we do, Chicago School GPS, is we help families find schools and actually find schools that fit you guys, because we definitely know that this is a very individualized process, even for kids within your own family. So absolutely, we are here for you to, if you want to say, hey, how is this? And I like this type of school for my child. We actually do public and private, and preschool through college. So there's a lot that we can help you with, and certainly that's what we're here for. So I think that's my last slide. Yes, that is my last slide. I can look through. Gosh, I was like a quick peek at the chat, and there were questions in there. So, and also the Q&A. So I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, hey, Grace.
Yeah.
All right. So what we did was, there are quite a few questions, detailed questions. I went ahead and created a Google Doc and shared the Google Doc with you.
Okay.
And I think this would be a good time to answer a few of those questions before I start my part of the presentation.
Okay. Do you want me, since are you going to try and like get your presentation up?
Most of them. Did you get the Google Doc?
Well, see, that would mean I would have to stop sharing. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
And then let me figure out how to find my
No
Google Doc.
problem. We're good on time. And I
Okay.
thought this would be easier because these are some really good questions.
Okay. So I did see that we received a copy of the slides. So this recording will be available for sure. For Lemmy, we'll figure out for how long, right, Lemmy?
5 days.
Yes.
So we're going to keep the recording up for 5 days. So you'll be able to watch the replay. We won't be sharing the slides, but you will have access to the replay for 5 days.
And I do want to say, all of the information that I presented is completely all in from go.cps.edu. So for sure, don't worry about that. So I answered that live. Okay. Let's see if I'm just going through the Q&A first. Sorry. So Amanda said, I called CPS and they said you have to come in for one-on-one exam and she'll have to be alone with adult masked. Yeah. I'm pretty sure they're going to do that because right? They've always done one-on-one, and you've always not been able to see your child, and it's always been nerve-wracking. But now you're gonna have to wear a mask, or she's gonna have to wear a mask. So just, yeah, I think this is true. Okay, so Laura said selective enrollment rolling, meaning is it more advantageous to apply now? No. You don't now versus December 11th. Just don't miss December 11th. Do not miss that deadline because they will not open it up, because I tell everybody, like, your computer probably will, like, or your internet will go out at 11:50, and it closes at 11:59. So I tell everybody, please apply before that time, like sometime in the last week. And so, because December 11th at 11:59, that's online portal is going to shut. There are also paper applications and whatever, but that's like by 6 p.m. that day or something. So yes, it's not more advantageous. No, you can even start testing and everything like that, but no decisions are made at all. So there's no rolling admissions. My son has a mid-September birthday, just after the age cutoff. Can you touch on pros and cons of early testing? Also, if we decide to test early and it doesn't work out, are we able to retest next year? Yes, you can retest every year. Every year you can totally test and et cetera. The process is such that if you don't get in, you can try getting in the next year, but you're gonna have to go through the process again. Otherwise, for sure, once you're in, you do not have to go through the process again. Okay, so so that was, hopefully, yes, you can do that. It was my understanding that the kindergarten test is one-on-one regardless of age. No, if a child is a late birthday and will be 5 when they sit for the kindergarten, are they given a packet similar to the first grade? Now, all kindergartners are one-on-one. All kids testing into kindergarten are one-on-one. So your child may have just turned, 5 in September, and they're sitting for the test, and they're 5 in like a month in October or whatever. Let's say December this year, so 5 in a couple months. Or your child is just turned for August 29th, and they're just a little tiny 4-year-old as they're sitting to take that test in December or January. They're all one-on-one, and it doesn't matter, they're not given the packet for that older 5-year-old. No, it's all one-on-one for kindergarten. And again, no one's been tested yet this year for COVID, but that's what has been done in the past. Copy of the presentation for 5 days. You can access the presentation, but again, all of my information is from go.cps.edu. There is a lot of great resources on there. So for sure, please go to go.cps.edu. There's a tab called elementary. You can get a lot of information from that tab. So they have everything that I talked about, including FAQs and all that stuff. So absolutely, that is the source. I present what I know, but certainly that is the source. So go to go.cps.edu. You're much better off going there. Do you simultaneously rank magnet and SEE schools? So magnet schools are not ranked at all. Magnet schools are 20 schools in this other lottery application. They're not ranked. You can get multiple offers for magnets. So it is not single offer, and it is not ranked. Selective enrollment application, separate strand, is ranked and is single offer. Okay, so you literally, I tell this to all my clients, is that you have, for kindergarten, you have your guaranteed neighborhood school. So that's one school. You can choose up to 20 lottery-based schools or that choice application, and you can actually get accepted to all 20. That would be very rare, but that could happen. So you have multiple acceptances for that. And then so that's 20. So now you have 21 schools potentially for your child. And then if you do the selective enrollment application on top of that, it's a single offer. So you can get, you can choose 6 schools, but you can only get one offer. So potentially you can be looking at 27 schools for your child, but only 22 possible schools as an offer. So hopefully that makes sense. Melissa said, do you apply to open enrollment magnet for the same application? Yes, it's the same portal. So go.cps.edu, and then you click on the upper right-hand corner. It says login, and it's done through School Mint. So after you make an application, or you type in all your general information for your child, and then you can start to pick schools. And so it'll show you, oh, these are selective enrollment schools, and it'll have that as on the portal. And then there's also the magnet school. So you can just start picking schools, and it'll automatically separate into these 2 different types of applications. There's a tutorial on go.cps.edu. There's so much information there. So yes, absolutely. Okay, do I need to, and let me cut in when you need to cut in. Do I need to rank my neighborhood school? No. Do not even put your neighborhood school. Your neighborhood school does not need to take up any space on your application, okay? What'll happen is if you put your neighborhood school on your application for your choice or whatever, it'll literally take up one of your 20, and it'll say not offered. You cannot be offered a spot at your neighborhood school, so just leave it off. Your neighborhood school, and make sure it's your neighborhood school by going to the school locator tool, but it's automatically guaranteed, okay? So don't take up any spot on your application if you're like deciding between 25 schools to put down, and don't put your neighborhood school down as one of those. Okay, so yes, your neighborhood school is always your fallback, any time of year. Literally, you could start, I don't know, any school. You're like, okay, let's try this selective enrollment. Your child was there for 2, even 3 months. And it's like, oh, the commute's too hard, or, oh, it's just not working out. You put your child into you can always put your child into your neighborhood school. It can be mid-year, doesn't matter. Okay, Lauren asked, do all RDCs follow the same curriculum? No. We're considering McPherson RDC, but I haven't been able to find much info because it is a new program. Yes, it is. And oh gosh. Oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. Wondering if the curriculum in this program will be similar to what other, yes. So it's not the same, but there is, it's all supposed to be slightly accelerated. I know McPherson, because they're inheriting, if you will, Coonley's overflow. There's a lot of work between, the teachers and the cohorts and everything like that in terms of, so I suspect it'll be similar-ish to what Coonley had going on. But at the same time, there's autonomy between these schools, and just every RDC is not exactly the same, but they are accelerated, so than the
Okay.
general ed population. Yeah.
Okay, great. So there were many more questions. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put together sort of a Q&A document, and we'll put in some answers to those great questions, and then also attach that alongside the recording. Okay, so we wanted to make sure, since you guys showed up, that we answer your questions. Also, for those of you that did register, I did mention that there would be a door prize. So for each of you that registered, you will receive the door prize of How Do I Teach My Child to Read document. This document has a chock full of strategies in terms of how we accelerate a child's reading skills and building that strong foundation. So congratulations on getting that bonus for attending today's session. I'll just lightly say, my name is Lemi-Ola Erinkitola. I'm the founder of the Critical Thinking Child, and not too long ago, I was in the same position as you, as a parent who really wanted to be the ultimate teacher for my children and looking for the best school options. I founded the Critical Thinking Child back in 2013 because I felt there wasn't really a straightforward way for parents who were serious about supporting their child's academic success, not just getting them into the school, but being a part of this wonderful journey and watching them learn and grow and blossom. And there wasn't a blueprint. So I've spent with my own kids over a decade, just really figuring out what is the code, what's the formula, what works best for working parents, for parents who have a lot going on. And now, with this pandemic, I'm glad to say that the formula still works, even in the event of whether there's a strike with CPS or a pandemic, the formula still works. So the code has been cracked, and I'll talk to you more about that. But nothing gives me pleasure in terms of helping parents like you who are in the position that I found myself in many years ago and didn't have any strategies for success, and was totally confused by the navigation process. So Grace did a wonderful job. Thank you so much, Grace. That was an outstanding presentation, just really laying out the navigation. And we know more is still to come because all of the information was not provided yet by CPS. Here is just some of the success stories, just so you know you're not alone. There are families who found themselves, really torn and overwhelmed, but really wanted to focus on making sure that their child had an enjoyable experience, a fun, play-based experience as they prepare for the gifted and classical or selective enrollment elementary school test. They didn't want it to be a frustrating experience. So we have personal success stories with Chicagoland families who just really enjoyed the process and became very engaged in the process, where it just became a whole fun experience for the entire family. And that's what our motto is about. It's not about us just teaching your child or, giving your child question after questions after question. It's about making memorable moments that years later, your child is going to remember the way you taught them, the way you cared for them, especially during this time of the pandemic. I was at the grocery store 2 weeks ago, and a young gentleman came up to me, and I didn't recognize him, but he was in his late teens. And he came up to me and told me that he was on his way to college in the East Coast, but he remembered taking a class from me about shapes, learning about shapes and rotations. And he said that was one of the most valuable courses he took, because later, even though when he was younger, he didn't see the connection. He said later, when he started to pursue higher mathematics, the information that he learned came into play. So the information that your child will need to learn to prepare to be successful, not only for the selective enrollment tests, you want them to have sustainable success. And nothing gave me greater joy than to hear that the information and the approach and the model that we use can last a lifetime. So gifted versus classical, the test prep component. So what does it mean to be gifted? Okay, that word is used in the industry, probably not in the way that most of you on this webinar is thinking. Okay, there is an academic term for gifted education, and then there's the, I need to get my kid into the best school possible, which is, a gifted test. So what does it all mean? I try to stay away from the term unless I absolutely have to use it, because personally, I feel all kids are gifted. There are gifts within each and every one of us, and we just need to uncover that. But we need a strategy, because when children were born, we didn't get a blueprint as a parent to say, this is the ABCs of the genius child, right? Or bringing out their best potential. So gifted doesn't necessarily mean that your child has to have a brain of an Einstein and, put together quadratic equations at the age of 5 or 6. That's not what we're talking about here. Now, certainly there are children who live in this universe that have just phenomenal, remarkable cognitive abilities, but I have to tell you, they're few and far in between, and they're like less than 3% of the total population. Okay, so gifted doesn't mean that you have to be gifted in all areas. Okay, that's important to note, because later on, when you start to support your child, you'll find that there's some highs and there's some lows. Okay, and I don't want you to get discouraged, because what you'll need to do is figure out how to support their lows. The mistake that many parents make is that they'll find that their child may have some high aptitude for certain skill set, and that's wonderful, let's say math, and so they'll continue to give mathematical questions, and then they won't really put a lot of effort on the reading or the puzzles, because their child enjoys maths, and it's easier, it's more comfortable to support your child that way. Okay, well, that's not really making the child well-rounded so that they can be, their best for the test. So we want to look at multiple areas, but expect that your child may not be high in all of the areas. That is normal. Gifted students, children in general, will struggle when they learn something new. It's just human nature. We like to be in our comfort zone, but the way the learning process works is that we learn something, we get familiar with it, we get comfortable with it, and then we say, oh, that's easy. Have you ever had a child say, oh, that's easy? Something that they thought 2 hours ago was challenging, but you were able to successfully get them to try it. Then they use the "that's easy" term, okay? So expect a struggle, but we've got to support them to show them how they need to move forward, because new learning does not happen without a challenge or without some type of struggle. Okay. And the struggle doesn't mean that it has to be bad. It could be good struggle. Okay. Gifted does not mean you as a parent also have to be gifted. I get this as well, where parents look at their own learning experience and may think back that maybe they were passed up for gifted programs in their elementary school. Listen, guys, elementary process, as you probably remember it when you were in school, has changed significantly. I mean, just look at us. We're just doing a lot of teaching in a remote standpoint. Education has just been turned upside down. So I want you to think flexibly about the potential of what your child can now achieve, because some of the barriers that parents before you had to deal with, those barriers have come down. Okay, so this is exciting news. So you don't have to look at your child's learning trajectory in a way in which you look at your own previous learning trajectory or the way you learned when you were a child. The possibilities are so open for us now, and we want to talk about that. Okay, so the gifted test and preparing your child for the test is really thinking outside the box. Okay, that out of the box thinking. I know probably if you showed up here today, you probably did some prior research. This is probably not your first stop in terms of the research. You probably heard something about an OSAT test, a COGAT test, NNAT test, a WISPE, all those different acronyms that they use. If you Google long enough, you will find some research out there that ties to, this is for gifted test prep, this is for, cognitive test prep, and it can be very overwhelming. In the history of me being a Chicago public school parent, I have never seen the test that they have administered. In addition, I have never seen sample questions from CPS. And so it is my understanding that CPS has a database full of rich, challenging questions that they change up from time to time. That being said, you can buy all the workbooks, in the universe and still not prepare your child successfully for the test. And you can spend a lot of money, make the process very boring and frustrating trying to reach that goal. Okay, so we don't know the exact questions that are on the test, but we have a good idea. We have a great idea of the types of questions, meaning the categories that would be there. But more importantly, we know how to get children to stretch their cognitive skills and to learn faster and to accelerate learning. Okay, so there's one thing to know the what, like the types of categories, but I think more importantly for you as parents is the how, because that's what I struggled with as a parent, and that's what I spent years researching and paving the way to develop a formula on the how. So I would also say, I know Grace put this in her slide, that for CPS, those regional gifted centers tend to have a curriculum 1 to 2 years above grade level, and the classical curriculum tend to be 1 year above grade level. Okay. The classical is straight achievement based. Okay, it is an achievement based type of process. And what I mean by that is that they're definitely going to be like reading and math in most classical types of assessment. Now, CPS can change it up. Who knows? Every year, there's always a new element. So I'm just going to say it right now. You and I are walking this path together, and we're also waiting to see if there's going to be any new elements or new changes that CPS will unveil during the later weeks to come, right? So don't get wrapped up on, if you're going to, when to start. We'll talk more about when you'll need to start. But suffice it to say, if I've been assessing hundreds and hundreds of kids pretty much on a monthly basis for the past 10 years and working for the Department of Education through different initiatives. The list goes on. And as an assessor, you learn a few things when you're working with this particular cohort of children. And there are only so many things that you can test them on to determine if they're higher than their peers or not. So what I'm trying to say, and I hope I'm making myself clear, is that even if they're not saying reading and math, you can expect, like the phonics, the sight words, math number sense, because all of these skills that I've mentioned and more are the skills that children need to be prepared when they enter the school system. Okay, so this is not a test where they take the test, they get in, and then they start failing once they enter the classroom. Oh no. the types of questions is to just determine if they can fit into an accelerated classroom and do well, okay? And do well, which is what we all want for all of our children. We want them to be successful and comfortable in the classroom. So let's look at that classical test. We've got an achievement-based education. For those of you who may be in the education field, so you know there's been some adjustment with the Common Core standards, okay? So that's just added a bit of a rigor, and that's been in place for about, 3 years right now, where we've seen that it's taken more effort, okay, more skills ability to reach that, 90 percentile. Suffices to say, the students have to learn more. They have to absorb more information. So I like to think of the classical test as how much can a student, kind of memorize and learn and retain based on their prior experience and what they have been taught, versus a gifted test, which is how do you reason and problem solve with questions that you've never seen before, okay? Two different types of tests, two different ways to prepare a child or a student for that type of test. It is not the same thing, okay? Let's go through quickly some sample questions. I think we've got time. Okay, so one of the common questions that we commonly see on what I call high stakes tests. Okay, so there are many questions, but I'm just gonna pull the ones that are probably most common. This one it'll go by different names. What is the odd one out? What doesn't belong? Which one isn't a good fit? Oh, you can go ahead and type your answers into the either chat or Q&A, whichever one. Grace will have to help me with this one, but if you can go ahead and type your answer in. So how does this question work? Okay, so you're looking at a series of pictures, okay? And then your child may be asked, which one is the most different? Okay, or which one is the odd one out? Which one doesn't belong to the group? There's different ways the assessor can pose that question, but the intent is the same. And so we would want your child ideally to look across the row, look at all the different options, because you'd be surprised how many, with our own two eyes, how many children will just look at A and B and that's it. They don't have the spatial practice to look across all of the options. And many times parents are unaware of this, okay? And we've got strategies to help expand their spatial awareness.
I'm happy to report the parents have gotten it right.
Okay. All right, so we've got much to cover, but I'm sure you guys can figure this one out. Essentially, how I would go about teaching this if a child missed it, I would go about looking and exploring living and non-living things, okay? So it's not just, oh, did they get the right answer? Did they select C? But we go deeper with the critical thinking and ensure that they have an opportunity to explore living and non-living things, so that the next time something comes across, a question, and it may not even be in this format, they have that top of mind. They have exposure to the higher level thinking skill. Okay, let's try another one. So this would be for testing for kindergarten. Now, when you're testing beyond kindergarten, there's more reading involved. What we have found is that when we accelerate readers for those testing for first grade, when your reading is at a certain level, we have found that the scores have been higher, at least for those students that have come through our program, because we continue to keep that data and the parents report back on the scores to us. So we're able to compare our post-assessment, compare our model for teaching, and then look at the results. But what we have found is that the earlier you're building those reading skills, the better it is for the child. So here is a similar problem, but in text instead of pictures, okay? All kinds of ways if they miss this. If you're a hands-on parent, you can start to do color mixing with paint or crayons and those type of things. So that's something you would be able to do at home.
You stumped everybody because nobody answered that, and I don't even know the answer to that.
Okay, so when we're looking at the rainbow.
This is for kindergartners? Come on.
Yeah, these questions, these are thinking questions, thinking outside the box kinds of questions.
Okay, well now, yeah, sure. But
And again, testing for first grade. The kindergartners will get reading questions, but mostly phonics when you're testing. And we have to be careful in terms of how we're saying this. So I like to put testing for in front. So
right.
Testing for kindergartner, testing for first grade.
Got it.
Okay, so we got to be clear so we don't confuse the parents. Testing for first grade, if you're in our program, we're going to recommend that you have a child who's reading. Okay, I mean, I'm not even going to try to sugarcoat it. Okay, now let's move up, and this can be third grade and up as an early question, same type of question. And what we're seeing here is more spatial reasoning type of questions. This is actually one of the questions that we're giving to our academic center prep students. So those who have fourth graders, fifth graders on the call. This type of question, which one is the odd one out? Okay. I don't know if we have any brave souls. One of the things about
We've
being
got a B, we've got an A.
We've got a B, we've got an A. Well,
we got a C, we got a B.
Oh God, don't give us.
I don't know the answer, so I'm not 5.
Okay, B. Let's talk about.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, yeah, let's talk. Let's spend some time and let's talk about it. Okay, so here we have the. Now, first of all, this is what we call subitizing. Okay, so hopefully what we would expect a student to do, and even adults, to subitize, meaning you should be able to see this as a group of 5 and not count one by one. A group of 2, a group of 3, a group of 4, a group of 2. So you should be able to see things in clusters and groups. Okay, so hopefully where you can instantly recognize the amount. Okay, that particular skill is called subitizing. That is an important skill in building mathematical foundational number sense. Okay, so that's first things first. Now we have to look at different patterns. Okay, so if I'm looking at a pattern, I'm looking at up and down, vertical. I'm looking at diagonal here, vertical, vertical, diagonal. So I'm starting to see a pattern where one may be the odd one out, may be different because it doesn't fit nicely into the group. Okay, so C, I can get C from this model. 1, 2, 3, 4, I can get that from this model. And then 2 on the diagonal, I can also get that. But what I don't get, what's not shared in common, is this one. Okay, so B, whoever said B, that is indeed the correct answer. Okay, a little bit deeper thinking, not what we would give students testing for kindergarten. So just want to make that clear. Definitely third grade and up. For those that are testing for kindergarten, we would definitely make sure that they have subitizing skills, okay? Because that does come into play where they do have to count things spatially or view items and objects in a spatial format. Okay. Okay, let's look at that. So this is what I mean by being able to count spatially. This is a commonly missed question. So K through second grade, okay? K through second grade, testing. How many shapes are square and gray? Okay. And you may say, well, my child can count, right? My child knows shapes, okay, which is important for the cognitive exam. But when they're counting, are they paying attention to the entire question? Okay. And so we want sometimes it's about listening skills. Okay, they're gonna, last year, they, for those that were testing for kindergarten, had to come to a proctor and listen to the proctor ask the questions. And you know, kids can get distracted. And if they're not listening, maybe they heard how many shapes are square, right? And then they're just counting just the square shapes. So you definitely want to practice the listening skills. For the young students, that's 80%, 80 to 90% of it, really, because if you don't hear the question correctly, how can you possibly answer it correctly? Okay, so we want square 1, 2, 3, 4, but we want square and gray, so that would just be 3. Square and gray. Okay, let's look at another question here, analogies. Please, please don't forget about analogies. And analogies are critically important if you are planning to test for, I would say, the Regional Gifted Center. It is one of the most commonly used cognitive types of tests, all the way through the SAT and ACT, all the way to the collegiate level. Any high stake test that I have had to prepare my own children for, or other children in our program, we always include analogies. So kudos to those of you who went ahead and purchased that blue book on analogies early, because we are almost sold out. But I'm glad you took advantage of that opportunity when you registered for this webinar. Okay, so they work the same way. This is a picture version analogy. Or actually, this one is not set up as an analogy. We will get to the analogy. This is one that we would give, that we would call classification. Okay. So we would call this classification. I love analogies, so I probably jumped ahead. Okay. All right, so we would call this what we would call classification type question. What belongs in the group? So hopefully that made it easier for you. So that answer would be right here. It's what we would want them to do. Now, when you're teaching children at home, especially young children, what I do is I have them just do the one finger point and make sure they can point directly to their answer. You will be surprised how many students, when they're, especially if this is going to be face-to-face like it has been in the past, some students will just take all 5 fingers and place it on the answer key. Now, if you're a proctor and you have hundreds, if not thousands of kids to assess, and you've got the one kid that's got all 5 fingers and you can't really make out the answer, you know, that may present a problem for the child who's very bright. So one finger point, please teach them to start pointing directly to the object and not take all 5 fingers to the page. That would be a very helpful tip, and it would make it easier for whoever's doing an assessment to identify that the child is indeed picking, you know, their answer choice. Okay, this is an example. This is an example of the analogy. Okay, so analogies work the same way. You get a pair, and then you look at how they are related. This is the mistake that a lot of children will make. Okay, they'll look at analogies and they'll go straight for the empty. Go straight for the empty box. And they'll look at the third image and they'll just forget about the first pair. Okay. Now, sometimes they can get the right answer that way, Oftentimes they can't. The whole purpose of the analogy is that you do some evaluation, you do some critical thinking. You look how these two shapes are related. How do they go together? I hope you're typing your answers in. What's happening here? Okay, there's a change. We have a white circle, but then we have a black square on top of a white circle. Notice how I use that vocabulary of prepositions, okay? On top of. Prepositions are so abstract, okay? This is what makes analogies somewhat challenging for many students. It's because the language to explain it is abstract. When I say on top of, when I say between, when I say underneath, these are abstract terms that young students really can't grasp because they can't touch it, like a noun, like give me a book, give me a cookie. They can visually see that and they can associate that with the term. But when you use terms like between, through, over, under, next to, left, right, they need more practice to understand that. Okay, so your answer is, so what's happening here? Now, this is just the reverse. This is, now we have a white circle on top of a black square. So we would just do the reverse, do the similar exercise here, right? We would do that similar exercise and then we would come up with A for that. Okay, makes sense? Now, process of elimination, for those of you that have 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, process of elimination should work because then you could go from getting 25% correct, your 25% chance when they're looking at all 4, but if you can eliminate 2, you take your chances up to 50%. And we have to teach them that, okay? You have to teach them that. So previous years, the testing for kindergarten students met face-to-face with a proctor, and then 1st grade and up, they came in a classroom type setting and had to fill in the bubbles for their answer, okay? Again, if CPS continues the same format, then we can expect the same thing, but we know in the strange time that we're living in, things can change. But probably we're not expecting too much, right? Because it's a lot of work to change a format that's been in place. It doesn't happen overnight. Okay, mental rotation. I'm just going to gloss through these real quick because I do want to get to some questions. So these are just some of the types of questions which are spatial. You can look at it on the replay and pause if you need to and try it at home with your own kids. Symmetry is so very important. A lot of what we do is help students practice the art of thinking. That's what we do. Help them practice the art of thinking versus memorization. Now, memorization is the foundation and it's where we start, but we don't leave them there. After we give them certain foundation that they do need to memorize, we take them to a level and we extend their thinking by having them, demonstrate their understanding, demonstrate their analysis and their approach to how they would go about solving problems. So symmetry is critical when we're talking about cognitive skills. For those of you testing for regional gifted, testing for academic center, etc. We like to make it fun. We come up with questions, what we call them fun sheets. And these questions just really allow children to engage and to have fun and apply it to real world experiences. So here we have a bird's eye view. Now, what are we doing here? We are also teaching geometry. So at the same time that we are extending their thinking with these types of questions, we are also teaching fractions. I don't know, can you see that? We're also teaching geometry. We're also teaching patterns. So it's 3 or 4 different elements that we build into each question. If you purchased our book, you should know on the label it says 200 plus questions, but the amount of questions you have are you know, there's just unlimited amount of questions, because you can change those questions around and make up new questions of your own. That's why we designed the book in the way that we did. Okay. We use black and white because black and white allows more focus and attention. Color tends to be a distraction. Lots of kids will say, well, I find it harder. They find black and white print harder. We've actually done a survey of our students, and they have communicated that black and white print tends to be harder. Okay, so in the absence of color, we want them to focus and be able to answer questions. So what now? All right, so the formula that I have put together that I have been using to support families is called the SMART formula. Okay, these are my foundational skills, pre-K through high school. Okay, I don't know if many of you followed us, but you know, my girls, the twin girls, graduated co-valedictorian of the high school in Chicago in 2019, co-valedictorian. So, and my son, number 4 in the largest high school in Chicago, while playing competitive basketball. You can have similar success. This is the formula that works when they're young, and it's the formula that works when they age up and go through the process. And I'm so happy that finally we have a blueprint that we don't have to change because of COVID. We don't have to change it up because of the pandemic. It still works, and it's still going to allow children to reach their academic potential. What are the SMART skills? Okay, so we've got the spatial that I talked about. We have number patterns, analogies, which is so very important, reading, technology. The tech has come into play because we're in a virtual world. So we've got recommendations on apps that we have found to be very complementary and beneficial, and then also games as well. So as a parent, I know you want the best for your child. You want your child to continue to learn. You want to prepare for the upcoming tests with success. So we've put together and revised our program because we are not meeting in person. I know there was a question for a parent looking for classes in person. We're not meeting in person. As a matter of fact, where we used to have our boot camps at IIT, they are not having any external events because of COVID-19, okay? So we're just following the safety guidelines. So what we do have is an extraordinary program, a 6-week virtual learning pods. You guys have heard of learning pods popping all over the nation, right? And it's hard to get into these learning pods because you need a lot of money and most times a lot of contacts. They've got lawyers there, they've got insurance, parents who have an insurance background, parents who are engineers that are building things. It's hard to get into this learning pod and have that experience. Well, we have our own virtual learning pod that we'd like to introduce just for you, Chicago parents. It's a play-based approach where you'll be an active participant in your child's education. The child will be safe, you'll be guided by experienced educators, and it'll help you build your own community because we're so isolated right now. One of the things that we're missing as parents is to be able to connect with and engage with other parents who are going through the journey with us. This is the time of friendship building. You know, if you've got a child testing for kindergarten, testing for first grade, chances are in a normal year, you would meet about 2 to 3 more families that you would connect with, and then their children would create a bond. You don't want to miss out on that opportunity just because of COVID. So we're connecting families together. We want you to bond. This is how it works. 6 weeks program, 3-step process that I designed myself. 1, we're going to give direct instruction. So yes, we're going to go through my blueprint. We're going to give you the information on what it means and how to move forward and how to teach your child that skill. You're going to get practice opportunity. Think outside the box for both gifted and for classical. Then you're going to break out into groups. Here's your virtual learning pods. You're going to connect with other families. There's nothing more enriching than having a child see another friendly face and know that I'm not going through this alone. So this is one of the, I think, the best parts that we're offering. Again, this is a brand new experience. And for the next 48 hours, because you showed up today and you're fast action takers, this is normally $997, okay, right now. But for only for those who showed up today, who registered for the next 48 hours, it's $697. That's how much I believe in this program. We are shaving it off by $300. Now, you're going to need a special code in order to get that discount. Okay, so we're going to verify that you did attend today and that you you did register in advance, because I think that the fact that you took the time out, purchased a ticket, showed up today, warrants some privilege and some perks. And so this is one of the perks. I thought long and hard about this. This type of, we're typically innovators in the industry. Our company has just been recognized at a global level for being one of the thought leaders in education. What we do is so different in that we have had people all over the world reach out for our program. And here we are in Chicago offering it directly to you to have easy access. So I hope you take advantage of it. So there's a couple of things, okay, that I want to also mention before we go into Q&A. So we have the bit.ly Smart Learning Pod website where you can go and register. Some of you may say, well, that's nice. This is my second time around, or maybe I don't have the time because, or the date doesn't work with me. All of these courses are offered on right now, Sunday, and we may offer one during the week, but it's kind of hard to say. So let's say you want to do it yourself. Okay, we're trying to make this possible for every type of parent, okay? I know many of you will want to attend the class, and I encourage you to, because that price is not gonna stay the same. It is a special offer only. And so some of you may be interested in our Smart Start course. This is where I lay out the blueprint in a pre-recorded class just for parents. I lay out my SMART skills. I give you additional resources, and you go through the various modules at your own pace, okay? Now, for those of you that are interested in that self-pace, 24 access to the Smart Start course, today we're offering it for $297. Okay, get in there, go through the modules, skip around if you need to. I have even put in assessments, okay? Some light level assessments, right? Because we know parents are not the best assessors of their own kids, especially, because we're so super loving that, if a child misses a question, we'll say something like, that, well, he knew it last week. Well, I don't know why he's not answering it. He knows that already. We do that as parents. I know I do it, and I'm probably guessing I'm not alone. And so whenever I had to have my own children assess, I didn't do it myself. I hired somebody, okay? Whenever they needed tutoring for high stake tests, I didn't do it myself. I hired somebody. I may have, because of my level of expertise, given them the curriculum to use, but, I try to, do my best and get in where I fit in as a parent, especially knowing my own children's learning style. And it's worked successfully for me. Okay, so some of you have put into the comments, where can we get an assessment? You do need an assessment. The assessment is your roadmap. How are you going to know if there's improvement? How are you going to know the highs and lows that we talked about without an assessment? So the assessment range, you can get a classical assessment, which will include reading and math for $297. Or if you're only interested in gifted assessment, then that's $297. Or if you want both the classical and gifted, I need it all. I'm not sure what school, I need to make sure that they are high in reading and math. I need to know where they're at. I also want to prepare for gifted and give them that option as well. I'm going to go for the $499 and just get the full assessment. Many parents do that. About 80% of our parents go for the $499, and they are not disappointed. it is such an eye opener for their own children, where they can see and just immediately just get straight to helping and supporting their child on their learning gaps, if you will. Okay, so last, for those of you that are fourth grade and up, I know there were a few of you who purchased a ticket and showed up today. I wanted to let you know I did not forget about you. We actually have our Academic Center Prep course happening on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock, from 4 to 5:30. Okay, we've already started, and we're going to start another cohort in November. Okay, so if you missed that one, not to worry. We have another opportunity coming up in November, and we won't forget about you. So make sure you email me, let me know that you were on this webinar and you have a child and you're interested in the Academic Center Prep. Okay, so I would like to take some questions. We've got 15 minutes, and I know that was a lot, but we spent a lot of time preparing ourselves since March, over the summer, leading up to the fall, on how we can best serve you, keep everyone safe, and make sure we give you the opportunity to receive our blueprint and our stellar program that we've been offering, for the past 5 to 7 years. We didn't want you to miss out because of the pandemic. Okay, but this is only for a limited time. We need fast action takers, parents who are serious, parents who want to get started. This is going to take a while, right? Because the testing will open up in December, at least test dates. Once you see the assessment, you're gonna want to say to yourself, we better get going on this. It's a lot for my kid to learn, and I want to do it the right way, and that's what we're here for. Okay.
So Lemmy, we've got some people wondering how to purchase your books, like the blue book, and then somebody said, if we purchase a blue book, how do we receive that? Via regular mail, UPS, email? Is it a download? What is it?
Okay, so the books are hard copy. So if you purchase the books, then we mail it to you. Okay, so we all know that the mail is taking a little bit longer, but we sent out, we're going to send out another mailing out today. So if you can go ahead and purchase that. Now, the thing is, you were able to purchase it at a discount if you signed up for this particular event. The books are normally $58. But they are, I think they were $39 for every attendee. So if you would like to purchase a book today at the $39 price, and so that we can probably get it out to you today or later, no later than Monday, put it in the mail, then you'll please have to email me, because that's probably the only way to do it, and still take advantage of the discount. Otherwise, you'll be paying full price. So let's see.
And everybody will get a follow-up email too, because right, so they can certainly also do that.
Yes, but not even with the follow-up email, not every offer will. The offers have a time limit to them.
Right. You want to put your email in the chat?
Yeah, I'm typing it right. It's Lemi-Ola at criticalthinkingchild.com. If you need an assessment, we will prioritize your assessment. Okay. I know this is a busy time of the year. This is not the only thing we do. We actually support the schools in their transition for the remote learning. We don't want our school system to fail. So my team and I, since March, we were commissioned to help the Chicago Public Schools and many other districts do the transition for the remote learning. But if you are interested, and I hope you are, in assessing your child, please reach out to me. We also sent the link there, but we will make time for you. I will move my schedule around if need be, or my team schedule, and make sure you get the assessment that you're looking for. Okay, but you gotta act quick. It can't be 2 to 3 months from now and then, expect us to move mountains. This is now, okay? So if you want to take action now, this is the time to do it.
There was a question, can you do the Sunday prep courses without doing an assessment?
No, unless you, I shouldn't say no, because some of you have been through our program before. Okay, so if you've been through our program before and you have a recent assessment, and what I mean, 3 months, it's got to be 3 months. If it's greater than 3 months, it's really not going to provide much value. But if your child recently was assessed by another assessor and you have some good data, then we can waive the assessment. And I think that's fair, because what we're interested in is the data so that we can best serve you. So if you have another way of providing that and it's reliable and it's normed, then please feel free to bring that to our attention.
Somebody asked, would you recommend learning pods now if we're 2022, 23 kindergarten class? So fall 2022 is when they would start.
Fall 2022. I would, how old is the child exactly?
So I think 3.
3. We got to be, I would say wait until 3 and 8 months, or 4, between there. So no younger than 3 years, 8 months. And we would recommend that you start off with our Sunday reading mastery program before you move into the learning pod. So if you have a child who is not testing this year and you want to get an early start, let's get started on that reading. Okay, sign up for our pre-K reading program Sundays, and let's get your child accelerated in reading. You can take care of that reading, and then we can move on to math, and then we can start to open up the other possibilities for you. Okay, so you can do that 2-year plan that some of the parents have done who were early starters. Yes.
And then let's see, there was evening, weekend. Yeah, so you mentioned Sunday, and we mentioned the age to start the class, 3 years, 8 months, right? Okay, and then for kindergarten, somebody said, is there a link or a set of links that you can share? We can download some questions for practice. I don't know about, yeah.
Is there a set of links?
Yeah, I think you just mentioned like you can certainly look up Colgate.
I think you can Google. If you got a computer, you can Google and probably find some practice questions. We create our own. You know, I go through the process of classroom testing all of our questions. So we take real live, you know, children, and before we release a book, we go through, we create the questions using looking at the results of the assessments and the commonly missed questions. So we take those commonly missed questions and we modify them. We add a different element to them, maybe a critical thinking element to them, you know, hire artists who can design it. So it's a process. It takes about, you know, 2 years to get a book out, really. No, unfortunately, we don't have free questions. We're just a small, you know, organization. But maybe some of the larger ones can give you cognitive type questions if you just Google that and find some samples. But we're more of that like boutique type of business where we kind of customize a lot of what we do.
And then somebody else asked about, so will we send them an email letting you know more about when the select enrollment tests are available and how it will be done? Like, so Lemi and I both have newsletters. So you can go to, for me, it's shyschoolgps.com and sign up, and then Lemi, criticalthinkingchild.com. So if you sign up for our newsletters, but certainly go to go.cps.edu. I tell everybody that is the source for select enrollment testing and the latest news. But yes, I mean, I do a newsletter, and so does Lemi. So we can let you guys know that way. Okay. I know some people, let's see, some people want 3.5 question early start. She's 3 years, 9 months. I mean, Lemi, you said you could start as early as 3 years, 8 months. So I think
I will start with an assessment. So if you've got a child under 4 and you want to get a head start and you're on this call, please start off with an assessment. And then that will give you the roadmap on how to get started. And you know, it's prime age because the brain is developing, you know, between the ages of 3 and 8. This is like the prime time to mold and model your child's cognitive skills and do it in a fun way that's going to be long lasting. But you got to know how to do it. You got to know what makes sense and what to focus your time on, because you're so incredibly busy, like many parents, right? Trying to work from home and handle the at-home learning and deal with all the safety issues and concerns. So there's, we help shortcut that and save you time, save you energy, save you money so that you can get started.
Right. And then there was, somebody had a question, I think it was for me, about the school ratings. So, you know, CPS has their school quality ratings profiles, from 1+ the highest to 3 is the lowest, and they've seen a school drop from 1+ to 1, and what's the deal with that? And you know, I always say that you have to take ratings with a grain of salt. CPS is actually also revamping their ratings, so they are making some changes. But ratings in general are a very broad brush stroke, because they you know, take into consideration like surveys that are returned from families or attendance levels and et cetera. And so there's been a lot of changes actually recently. So it's not a big, I always tell families, do not stress about a school that's changed the ratings, because there is a lot behind the reason why for that. So yeah, I would not worry too much about the change from one level to another level. So
Okay, so there's a couple of questions for me to
yeah.
resend that link on the virtual learning pods. And so I just put that into the chat. Again, you'll need a special code to take advantage of the discount, because I think the regular price is there. So we will send you the code. Now, we are going to use the email that you use to register and purchase the ticket, okay? I know many of you may have different emails, and then we got some emails stating they didn't get the link. Well, it went to the email that you used to register, and hopefully there are no typos in that. But that's the only source we have, okay? If you feel that you did not receive something and you received your order number, just kindly go ahead and just email us. We'll take care of you, and we'll make sure it's all straightened out, okay? We do not want you to be left out. Now, there was another question saying, how do we conduct assessments when we're not doing in-person, you know, face-to-face contact with kids? We've been conducting the assessment in a virtual platform, a virtual format, and they have been, the results have yielded to be just as successful as when we were doing it face-to-face. We did not get there overnight, okay? We spent through March through August doing over 1,000 assessments. So to get good at something, you got to do a lot of it, right? We all read Malcolm Gladwell's book, right? That 10,000 hours that I'm referring to. So to get good at something, you need a lot of experience. So we spent immediately in March, from March until current, we've been assessing continuously in a remote format. So we've got it pared down. Now, we'll continue to improve it as things come along, but we've already produced and yield you know, great results that are of good measure based on, you know, my experience and my fellow educators' experience.
Right.
Okay,
And then,
question though. So it will be remote via Zoom.
and another question, I think for me, was for can a child test for kindergarten based on late birthday and first or accelerated start in the same year? Well, no. Well, if you're doing the accelerated start test, that has to be done before you do your applications for that year. Otherwise, they have, so the accelerated placement policy is pretty strict. And again, go to go.cps.edu to look up that accelerated placement policy. But you know, if you don't qualify for early start, then you just go into the pool of kids who, you know, if they're 5 after whatever, by September 1st that year or the following year, you go into that pool. So yeah, I'm not quite sure I exactly understand the question, but basically.
Yeah, I think it's more about the timing. Like, can you test for both, depending on the birthday? If your child qualifies, we had a child who kind of met last summer, met that mark where they sat for the accelerated program. and then got an offer for the accelerated program. And then the fall, went for the selective enrollment. It really depends on when CPS has that opening for the accelerated application. So all I can say is that apply for what you can apply for. You know, apply for what your child may qualify for. The only thing that they can say is no, you know, they don't qualify, or you know, you can't do it or whatnot, but try, you know. So try your different options. That's what it's all about. So if you, and then you can decide, you're not going to be able to do both, okay? And when they do release the test results and the rounds of who has been selected, even if you selected a regional gifted school or a classical school, they're not going to let you pick between the two at that point. You know, they're going to send you an offer letter, and then you're going to have to respond. And if you can accept or decline, and then they're going to keep moving through the rounds. So try to narrow down as you go through the process, the type of school that would be a good fit for your child and would be a good fit for your family, so that if you know you're not going to pick that option, you're not even wasting your time bothering exploring that. Okay.
Right. I know that those six choices that you have to pick on the selective enrollment application, you have to rank them. So if your child did, you know, score whatever they're taking for kindergarten, they're taking both of those tests. They are slated into the program for which, you know, the high score, the computer pulls, you know, the high score, the score that your child scored, and then pulls the application. And if there's still room in the schools that you chose, then you will get an offer. If there's no more room, then you won't get an offer.
Okay, so we are at time, but I think we have one more question, Grace. This will be our last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Last question. So if my kid is 5 now and she takes accelerated to go to first grade, does that mean she takes the first grade test instead of kindergarten test if she's approved for the early entry to first? So the first thing is, to do the early entry to first grade, you have to make sure that, yes, she finished a curriculum that was kindergarten approved teaching curriculum. And then you can, yeah, it's a little I literally in 9 years, I've not had a single family do this. So very few people do this, especially because accelerated is already almost 2 years ahead. So if she takes accelerated test to go to first grade, that means she take the first grade test instead of kindergarten. So she needs to be approved to take that test. And again, you have to go through this process in order to be approved to do that test. So you go through and prove that she has done the kindergarten curriculum. And after that, then they will allow you to sign up for that test. So you have to get started early, basically, on that right now, is my advice for that.
Yeah, and the accelerated process, as we know, is still relatively new, right? Only a couple years. Last year was the first year we were like collecting data from our students on it. So, and then now we'll see what happens this year, but still a lot to learn about that process.
Right. And the thing that we, no, we're over time, but we just always want to emphasize there is a program out there for everybody, but the, selective enrollment programs may not be the best fit either. So just realize that there are a lot of school programs out there, and they do, should differentiate and should meet your child where they're at.
Okay. All right. So wrapping up, thank you so much, Grace. It was outstanding information you provided. I hope you guys learned for us. So we wanted to, give you a sort of a one-stop opportunity to absorb the information. We're in your corner. We're here to help you. You will get a replay that will last for 5 days. You'll also get a link to the codes to take advantage of the books, the assessment, and even the virtual learning pods. And I hope you do take advantage of that. You explore this journey with us. We're gonna do our best to provide every possible learning tool to help you meet your goal with the instruction, but we've got it covered. We know what we do works, and we don't want you scrambling, trying to figure it out when you've got a good resource here. So reach out to us. And if you, again, look forward to the replay. If you don't receive it within, I would say, the next 24 hours, definitely reach out, because the clock is ticking on some of those promotions and bonuses.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Have a good rest of
Thank
your
you.
Saturday.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.